Hey, what's happening, everybody? Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting to you live from Austin, Texas. Just a little bit after 12 noon. Bit of a failure to launch today at high noon, only because I've been super busy on the reading front, and I just finished a really powerful and great 2-hour session with the everything reading with the. I have the best clients. You know, I am so blessed that the people that I work with are, you know, they're open, and obviously they want to have a session with me because there's resonance, right? So, but it's such a joy to work with the people that decide that they want to hook up and, you know, do a session with me, because we could go really deep. You know, we can get into it. And that doesn't mean that that every single session goes like that. And sometimes somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to try this. I'm not sure what it's about," and have to break a few walls down, and that's okay. That's okay. Of all the years I've done this, look, you can't please everybody, and I'm not really trying to please everybody, but there's I want people to make sure that they have kind of at the very least approaching kind of a transformational experience. Because I understand, there are some astrologers out there that will charge upwards of $200 to $300 for a reading, and some of these people have waiting lists for months. But I know that I'm kind of in the sort of the middle range, but it is also the money that people spend is important. It is not in my world, it is not insignificant to spend $155 for a session with somebody. You spend $155. It's like, hey, I hope that there's something good that comes out of this. So I'm cognizant of that. I want to make sure that people get their money's worth. I remember for years when I first started doing this on the reading side back in seriously, with astrology. I had done tarot readings, tons of tarot readings in the 90s. That was kind of what I did, and I made money off of it. And I was a phone psychic during that time too. So it wasn't as if I was any stranger to doing readings. I used to do up to 20 tarot readings a day, down on Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. But this is different, right? I was entering into kind of a new realm, a new style. And I'd always used astrology, but not to the degree where we're using the entire chart as a template. So when I first started, this was when I first launched the website, which is back in 2008. And I would say within 5 months after I launched the website, maybe even a little bit before that, 4 to 5 months, I got my first request for a reading. So I was like, okay, well, how am I going to do this? And so what I did is I wound up pulling up the chart, and instead of writing out a printout, I just began to talk. And I talked for roughly about an hour with the chart, and that was it. And the person, they loved it. They thought, this is great. Fantastic. You got me. You nailed me. It's like all the things, all those green lights that you want to hear, or you want to see inside of a reading. So I was like, okay, well, more and more started to trickle in. And at that time, I was charging $55 for a reading, $55. And that $55, and I would go out and I would read for people for, I don't know, hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half. I'd lose track. And I was going through serious burnout because I had to do a lot of readings at $55 an hour. That was in 2008, 2009. I stayed at $55 an hour for a long time, for almost 2 years. I was around $55 an hour. And I had a lot of business. I had a lot of people that got readings. But I was trashed. I was totally trashed. Because I was doing readings all the time. But I look back at that time, and I have no problem with the fact that I was charging $55 an hour, because even with my experience doing other forms of divination, this was a new realm for me. So I didn't feel comfortable charging people $200 an hour for a reading. It was just not where I was. Now, did I stay too long at $55 an hour? Probably. A year probably would have been enough. Because that second year, I was really starting to get very burnt out. So we're talking 2010, right around 2011. And I think I started to raise I got up to about like 75, 77. So now here I am charging $155 an hour, which is still, I think, quite reasonable in terms of doing these sessions. But when you get the right person, which is really about 90% of the time, 95% of the time, I'd say, it's great. It's total magic, and being able to go into the charts with people. I've only had one person. I'm sure there are people who've been disappointed, because that's just life, right? We have expectations, or maybe I had a bad day, because that happens too. I do my best to be as clear a channel as possible. Take, better care of myself. So, when I call people up, they get the best of me, right? That's important. But we all have bad days, and I'm sure there are people that got me on a bad day, or I got them on a bad day. That happens. And there's sometimes people have like great expectations. And I think we've all had situations where we've seen a psychic or an intuitive, and we've had really great expectations, and all of a sudden we get really let down because they didn't have the magic answer, or our level of expectation was just too high. I remember I was in such a bad place back in the late 80s. I was going through my Saturn return, and I just moved to Seattle, and I was having a really difficult time. I was not happy. Nothing would have made me happy. And I got an astrocartography reading from the guys that started astrocartography. They were there. They were super nice guys. The guy gave me a great reading. And you know what? I was so self-absorbed and so into my own pain that I couldn't realize that these guys were really trying to help me. And they were very cool guys. And I look back and I go, did I really have to be that? Kept looking for that thing that was going to be the magic bullet or the magic key that was going to fit in the lock, and all of a sudden my life would change. And it doesn't really work that way. Sometimes it does. Sometimes you have the moment where your life pivots. But I'll tell you, most of the time, those moments are earned. They're earned. You put in time, you put in energy, you put in effort, and then there's an opening. It's not like all of a sudden, you're kind of in a shitty place, and then really what it really takes to get out of the shitty place is changing your attitude, changing your thoughts, changing your diet, whatever that is. You do those things, and you can begin to divest yourself of gravity and baggage and some of the heaviness. And then what happens then is that whether we believe in our hearts that we're victims or not, we begin to move out of that space, because we may not see ourselves as victims. We may be depressed, we may be sad. And for some people, they actually have really good reasons to be depressed and sad in a lot of ways. If they've gone through a terrible loss, an absolutely terrible loss, nobody's going to give them a hard time for being depressed and sad going through a terrible loss. And if they did, those people would be kind of heartless, wouldn't they? But if we're not going through a terrible loss, whether it's a loss of a loved one, a child, a wife, a parent, a brother or sister, a grandparent, or we're not going through a terrible loss where, let's say, we lose a limb or something, or we lose our eyesight, or the terrible loss is like a tremendous job that you put 20 years or 25 years into, and all of a sudden somebody sticks a knife in your back and says you're out of here, you're done, you're obsolete. Those are the kinds of losses that you can give people passes on for a while. I mean, there's even kind of at times shelf life to them as well, but we have to be very sensitive. It's not our time; it's kind of their time and God's time. So, but there are other periods in our lives where we go through things and they're not associated with these terrible losses, and yet we can't seem to get ourselves out of it. And we tend to look for, most of the time, we tend to look for the quick fix, try to, catapult ourselves out of our situations. And if it doesn't, like if we go to see a psychic or an astrologer or whoever, and they can't give us the key to that moment, then a lot of people become disenchanted. And really what it takes is to be able to make small changes so that you can experience the big change. I know it's really cliche, but it's true. It's true. The hardest thing that we have to deal with is patience in our process. You know, we all are engaged in some form of addiction. And I'm going to talk about addiction today as it relates to cell phones. Your show is going to be basically kind of in two parts. I'm going to talk about some health stuff, which I think is important, and then we're going to get off into Breakaway Civilizations and kind of, you know, what's going on with that and where this whole thing could be headed. And is it even real? Because there are people out there, there are two camps. There's one camp that says we have a secret space program. And I don't think that that's untrue, by the way. And there's another camp that says we can't get past the Van Allen radiation belt. And I don't think that's untrue either. So is there a way for us to have a secret space program and that we are prisoners in some ways of the Van Allen radiation belt? It's quite possible. It's quite possible, because if it is, and we'll explore this when we talk about it, okay, and how that might actually be. But we'll talk about some of the Breakaway Civilization stuff. We'll look at Blue Origin, SpaceX, and Asgardia. This Asgardia thing is a trip. I think I want to become a member of it. I want to nominate right now they have nominations going on. You can nominate yourself to be a potentate in Asgardia. Some Russian guy. We'll get into Asgardia. We'll talk about it. They just launched their first low Earth satellite, which means that they are the first declared nation in space. Asgardia. Very interesting. But yeah, so we have to be able to take those baby steps. It's hard. You know, we all have some form of addiction. It's not always noticeable. Whatever it is, to break out of that addiction and that trance is challenging. We have to work at it. You know, whether it's a food addiction, a distraction addiction, an addiction to our own suffering. You know, we're addicted to a lot of different things. And you know what happens when you're addicted to something? Like if you've ever gone through a period of your life where you are in an extreme state of dependency, one of the hardest things you can do is get yourself out of it. And there's reasons why. There's many reasons why. But one of the most difficult reasons is the effort, the perceived effort it will take in order to do that. Because there are people who go through addiction, they're not dumb. They're not dumb. They know what's going on with them. And on some level, they will say to themselves, well, in order for me to get through this, I'm going to have to make all these different life changes. And I'm going to have to break through inertia. I don't have to break through gravity. And I don't know if I want to or can at this point in time in my life. And then so what happens? Then the addiction gets deeper. And it gets deeper and longer lasting. And the person will say, well, I know what I need to do. I know what it's going to take. But it's like it's harder and harder and harder to get there because of the work and the effort involved in order to get through that point. And then, maybe this is not the first time a person's gone through addiction. Maybe it's the second or third time this happens. People backslide. And they know how hard it was the first time. They know how difficult it was. Now they're going into it thinking, I did it before, and here I am again, and I'm a failure now because I've succumbed to my demons one more time. This is a challenge people have. So, and there are people that go through 2 or 3 stages of addiction. They come out of it. It's hard to watch them. And they're people that you love. They could be your kids. They could be your wife or your husband. And it's a very, very difficult thing to go through and get through. So I'm going to get into a little bit of health stuff, and perhaps it's a good thing or timely to talk about addiction, and especially addiction with, guess what, cell phones. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. I got a son, he's got a cell phone, and it is the equivalent. It is the same thing. It is the same equivalent of being addicted to a substance. Cocaine, heroin, you name it. And when I take it away from him, Mike Adams wrote this. I'm not sure if it's the same Mike Adams as the Health Ranger, but this is a guy who's writing for High Times magazine. I think it's a different Mike Adams, unless it's the Health Ranger with the ZZ Top beard. My son is 14. He'll be 14 years old in March. And if he has a spare moment, he's on his cell phone playing a game. He's on his cell phone playing a game. And I've seen him lie to get that cell phone in bed with him at night, which I will not allow. But I've seen him lie. I've seen him do things. You see, this is the mentality of somebody who has, an attachment. Let's put it that way. So teens, he's not alone. This is Teen America dealing with these. You know what it's like? It's like when we were kids, we had TV. And that was a super powerful tool in shaping our consciousness. Cell phones are like TV times 100. Because you couldn't do a whole lot with our TVs. You remember back in the 70s when Atari came out with Pong and changed your TV into something radically different, which was this bloop, bloop, bloop. When we had that, man, we thought, this is great. It's totally great, man. We can just play this game for hours. And we thought that was big time. That was Atari. And look what they have now. They've got everything in that little module that connects them in ways that we could never comprehend if we were their age. Or, in the 1970s, it'd be absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, let me read this article for you. It says, do teens with smartphones have a junkie mentality? President Trump recently declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency. That's a real easy thing to do, Donald. Get the hell out of Afghanistan. You want to shut down the opioid crisis? Get the hell out of Afghanistan. That's one way of doing it. And maybe you can get your buddy, Jeff Sessions, out of the way when it comes to having organic alternatives like kratom, however you call it, or CBD oil, or whatever the organic alternative for opioids is. Yeah, there's something else out there for people, okay? You want to tackle the opioid crisis? Get out of Afghanistan and get rid of fentanyl and any other of these powerful opioids, and then empower the producers of CBD oil and cannabis oil, whatever it takes to get people out of their pain socket that is not as addictive. Real simple. At least I think it is. Okay, a partial move to help clean up the epidemic of drug dependence in the United States. Meanwhile, experts warned that the youth of America perpetuate addiction through the use of electronic devices. When parents give their children cell phone privileges, specifically smartphones with connections to various social media apps, what they are really doing is providing them with the key into the mad world of addiction. So says treatment specialist Mandy Saligari. Basically, teens with smartphones have a junkie mentality. When you're giving your kid a tablet or a phone, you're giving them a bottle of wine or a gram of Coke, she said during an interview with The Independent. It sounds ridiculous, but reportedly, some American children are entering rehab facilities to get a handle on a hardcore smartphone addiction. How about that? They're going into rehab for smartphones. Some of these teenagers are as young as 13 and are going through what is called digital technology treatment, an attempt to give them a chance at life outside the realm of swiping and scrolling. The Restart Life Center, which is located outside of Seattle, is one of the facilities offering this kind of rehab for kids who have lost control of trying to balance their day-to-day responsibilities and time with electronic devices. The program treats teens for internet use disorder and smartphones addiction. Dr. Hillary Cash developed it after a number of parents asked for help. When you start handing these devices to young children and they're distracted by the movement, the color, and sound coming from this device, that is mesmerizing enough that it will override all those natural instincts that children actually have for movement and exploration and social interaction. Dr. Cash told Sky News. Addiction is addiction. Salieri has more than 2 decades of experience in addiction counseling. And in 1990, she herself entered a drug treatment program. She believes society needs to put as much emphasis on addiction as a whole. She believes that we need to stop labeling it as something that can only happen with drugs and alcohol. This is what I was talking about. When people tend to look at addiction, their eyes tend to be on the substance or thing, but really it's a pattern of behavior that can manifest itself in a number of different ways, she said. But considering that opioids are killing teens, tens of thousands of people every year, and as far as we can tell, no one has ever died, they simply can't control their urge to post it. Okay, let me see this. Let me read this again. But considering that opioids are killing tens of thousands of people every year, and as far as we can tell, no one has ever died because they simply couldn't control their urge to post a photo on Instagram, is this so-called addiction to digital technology really a valid concern? Is it too strong a statement that teens with smartphones have a junkie mentality? Richard Graham, an adolescent consultant, psychiatrist with London's Nightingale Hospital, says the concern is valid. He told The Independent that if a child's habits with electronic devices are stopping them from going to school or engaging in other activities such as having dinner with family, they're losing control. However, smartphones could actually be saving your lives. Finally, teens with smartphones, final hit. Teens with smartphones have a junkie mentality. Over the summer, the New York Times published a piece indicating that smartphones and other electronic devices may actually be preventing children from getting wrapped up in illegal drugs. How about that? We now have an alternate. We have an alternate to illegal drugs. It's the cell phone. It is the surrogate. Over the summer, the New York Times published a piece indicating that smartphones and other electronic devices may actually be preventing children from getting wrapped up in illegal drugs. The story referenced data from the latest Monitoring the Future survey. It found that fewer teenagers than ever before are using illegal drugs because they're hooked on their cell phones. It also suggested that many kids are simply too preoccupied with digital technology to have an interest in drugs. The National Institute on Drug Abuse funded the study. In March, Nora Volkow, the director of the institute, said she was blown away by the results. You know what else kids are doing less of now? Having sex. They're having less sex than, say, a generation ago or a generation and a half ago or half a generation ago. It's not just drugs, it's also sex. Something is going on, she said, adding that smartphones seem to have become a substitute for teen drug use. Nevertheless, addiction experts like Salieri say it's important to teach kids at an early age how to self-regulate their use of electronic devices. She says establishing digital curfews is a healthy approach to getting a leash on the dog before it tears up the neighbor's lawn. Well, coming from a parent who has a 14-year-old son who has a strong connection to his cell phone, I understand this dilemma from the front lines. So I don't know how many of you out there also have children who are going through the cell phone thing, but we started to have an interesting number of comments on various posts now. So maybe you could leave a comment, whether it's on Spreaker or on YouTube, if you want to, if you feel like it, to sort of share a little insight into if this is occurring, how you've been able to work with it. But it's an interesting kind of contrast, right? I mean, here they are. They're on their cell phones, they're playing games, they're snapping pictures, they're texting, they're listening to music, but they're not doing drugs. That's it, or they're doing a lot less. That's a trip. I guess it's the lesser of two evils, or is it just addiction is addiction? Will you wind up in a gutter with your cell phone, pressed against your face? I don't know. We're in interesting times. Strange times. Anyway, I wanted to read that because I thought it was pretty fascinating in a lot of ways. Another thing I wanted to touch on here. Where did I find it? See if I can find it again. Wow, in just 4 days, Taylor Swift sells the most albums in 2017. That's not saying much because people don't buy albums anymore. But I'm sure it's still quite a large seller in some ways. Do you know what Clive Davis did when Whitney Houston had her first record? In order for him to create a buzz around Whitney's first record, Clive Davis bought the first 1 million records. Arista bought the first 1 million records. So that when Whitney's, back then, a gold record was 1 million records. It got changed later. Gold record got changed. That was a platinum record. I think Clive Davis bought 1 million units. If I'm not mistaken, it was either 100,000 or millions. Sometimes I'm wrong, but I believe at that time he bought enough records so that Whitney's record went gold immediately. So he created his own hype. Those were different times. Different times. I wanted to... There was a piece here about some foods here. 29 genetically modified foods. Is this it? Here we go. Since we're on a bit of a health thing today. Hold on a second. Go away. Go away. Go away. Thank you. Pop up. Okay, so this is from Waking Times. Research shows switching to non-GMO diet can reverse these 28 conditions. All right. So we want to ditch the GMOs. It's important. So the 28 conditions reversed with a non-GMO diet. After analyzing the data, remember this is from Waking Times, after analyzing the data, it becomes evident that research is consistent with reports by physicians in regard to improving patients' health by switching to largely non-GMO and organic diets. For many of us, that is a no-brainer. We do that. Unfortunately, the standards for organic are being changed all the time. So you've got to keep your eyeball on that. There's a lot of organic produce now showing up from Mexico in stores here in Texas. And I don't know if there's a different standard. I would assume that there probably is. Maybe it's better. I don't know. But I'll bet you it's different. A few of the most common conditions which typically see improvement are digestive issues like leaky gut, fatigue, and obesity. Absolutely. However, this new study has shown that many more common ailments can be improved by a switch of the diet away from genetically modified organisms. The complete list of conditions which were reversed or serially reduced by switching to non-GMO and their recovery rates. Digestive, you go from non-GMO to organic, 85% of the people who did that noticed an improvement. Fatigue, low energy, 60%. Overweight or obesity, 54%. Clouding of consciousness, brain fog. The brain fog stuff, to me, is that's chemtrail-y, to be honest with you. And eating good food, organic food, even non-GMO food is good, but who knows really, unless the food is grown in a hydroponically grown system, that it's still not getting the spew out of the sky. That's a whole different discussion. Okay, let's keep going. Food allergies, 50% of the people who did this, their food allergies went away. Mood problems, anxiety and depression, 51%. 48% improved their memory and their concentration. Joint pain, which is big, 47%. I'm an advocate of eliminating as many grains as possible from your diet. I'm sorry. Some people can do it. I can't. When I did, the joint pain went bye-bye. Seasonal allergies, 46%. Gluten sensitivities, 42%. About that. Insomnia, 33% of the people experienced better sleep when they got rid of the GMO foods. Other skin conditions, not eczema, 30%. Hormonal problems, 30% of the people experience relief with their hormonal problems. Musculoskeletal pain, 25%. Autoimmune disease, which is a pretty very specific group. What do we have? Like Graves, a whole host of these autoimmune disorders. 21% of the people experienced some relief when they went to a non-GMO based diet. It's pretty significant. Eczema, 20%. Cardiovascular problems, high blood pressure. High blood pressure is a real problem in our society. And I'm telling you right now, it is the metals. It is the metals we're sucking in every single day from what's coming down from the skies, and the metals that are, in our water. We live in a metallic culture. And just wait till they ramp up 5G. By the way, I don't know if you have been experiencing this, but the ringing in my ears has been off the charts for the last couple of weeks. Off the frickin' charts. And especially a couple of days ago, I was talking to a client, and I had my phone I didn't have it up to my ear. I had it on my shoulder, and all of a sudden, the ringing changed pitch, and it changed volume. It went up, and it became louder. Yeah. So we're running around basically with these metallicized bodies, and 5G's coming online. Heaven help us. Oy, 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 oy. What is it? What's the stuff called? Shungite? Go get your shungite. Put shungite in your water. Drink your shungite water. Check out shungite. Look it up. Let's see, what else do we have? Asthma, 14%. Menstrual problems, 13% of the people who switched experienced increased relief from their menstrual problems. Diabetes, 10%. Other mental disorders, 7%. Underweight, 6%. Cancer, this is interesting, 4%. Kidney disease, 4%. Infertility, 3%. Autism spectrum, 2%. Alzheimer's, 2%. And Parkinson's, a mere 1%. But it goes to show you that changing your diet is an important experience. And even something as simple as going from GMO to organic. And I know that a number of you out there have parents who are getting older. Some of them live with you, or you're in close proximity to them, and some of them are experiencing some of these conditions. Maybe one of the best things you can do is, and you don't even have to tell them, just change their diet. It's harder when we go out, because when we go out, we're all eating pretty much genetically modified foods, unless it's like farm to table, or unless it specifically says organic. You can rest assured that you're sucking down some GMO food when you go out to eat, which is why a lot of people have stopped that practice. It's also fairly expensive. So there's a video up here. This is on Waking Times. You want to see the video? I'm not going to play it, but it's about two doctors, Michelle Perro and Dr. Jeffrey Smith, the director of Institute for Responsible Technology, and they talk about the wonders of a non-GMO diet. That's a no-brainer for most of us, right? But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many people out there just wouldn't get that. It's the same thing with vaccines. GMOs and vaccines are kind of in the same camp, right? You've got the people who are pro-vaccine. They'll see GMOs as like, oh, this is great. Vaccines keep us healthy. GMO food can feed so many people. It's great. Don't worry about it. It's all great. Science is wonderful. That's always the argument when you get into the GMO thing with people. Yes, but it can feed so many people. It can feed so many people. And how are those people going to live? How are they going to live? Where are they living? What kind of conditions are they living in? Yes, let's feed them so they can continue to live in shitty conditions. Man. I saw this documentary last night. Mind blowing. I got to figure out what the name of it was. I mean, it was late at night. It was cruising around Amazon. I'm going to find this documentary. It's really an amazing documentary. It's about it's about arms dealers. And there's this guy in there there's a scandal with Margaret Thatcher and Prince Bandar, who was the Saudi Arabian prince. He was supposed to become king. He never became king. But Bandar was this guy who was really into taking advantage of the corruption of the West and doing all these arms deals and buying all these weapons from the United States, or not from the United States, through Great Britain. And they would basically give him all these perks in order for him to do these deals. They gave him his own jet. The British gave this guy his own jet. And of course there were women and women and women, and there was slush funds and kickbacks. It's a really profound documentary. I'm going to find it. I'll put it on the link here for the YouTube side. And one of the things that really, it's fairly recent, and one of the things that comes out of it is kind of the plans for Iran. And Chris Hedges is in this documentary, and man, does Chris Hedges have some gravitas. That guy's been through it. He was a war correspondent for 20 years. So he knows what the ravages and the wages of war are. And they get into the Bush era, and they get into Cheney and Reagan. Man, this is a really good documentary. I'll put it on the links for on the YouTube side. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about some breakaway civilizations. What does that mean, a breakaway civilization? A breakaway civilization is, for instance, back in the old days, when we were pilgrims, we wanted to break away from despotic, religious, anti-religious, tyrannical, taxical rule, right? Taxical is it's not a word, right? It's like, let's get out of here. This place sucks. We can't worship the way we want to worship. We got to pay way too many taxes. Let's get out of here. Let's go to this place, and let's see what's over there and carve out a niche in this new world. That was a breakaway civilization. So a breakaway civilization. And that was kind of, in some ways, sort of the Western European model was the last version of these breakaway civilizations. To go out and colonize, quote unquote, colonize the new world, which in and of itself had a kind of a large price to pay in some ways, in terms of future agreements and living conditions and karmic repercussions with some of the people that they encountered along the way. But that said, it was still an example of a breakaway civilization. So we have not really had a breakaway civilization for a while, although I'm sure... And by the way, I'm going to go back to this documentary real quick. When you watch this documentary, when you see this documentary, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get the name for it, and I'll put it in the YouTube comment section or box. You would begin to realize, well, we have a ton of potential here. And we always talk about potential. Like, what if? And we have this capacity inside of ourselves to be stewards of a domain in a way that can be absolutely tremendous, right? We all come online, we wake up, we get creative, we get imaginative, we love each other, real love, not this fake bullshit Hallmark love. Love is love. This is a love that you have to earn in some ways. And then we honor the creative spirit in each and every one of us, and the God within. And then now we're beginning to get to this kind of place where, really we should be headed towards, and should have been headed towards for a while, till we got hijacked by the Kennedy assassination. Truly, this world would be very different if John F. Kennedy had lived. And some people say he didn't die. I'm sorry, he did die. So this world would be in a very, very different place. Anyway, that said, you watch this documentary, and you can see that for a large part of the world, and maybe even the entire world itself, it's hell. It is hell. These people are living in hell. And we're blind to their hellish condition because of, where we are. And it's really funny, It's like there are people who are outraged at so-called white privilege. Whether they're white and they're outraged at their own white privilege or so-called white privilege, or outside of their of the demographic. Go hang out in war-torn Iraq for a while. Go hang out in parts of Afghanistan. Go hang out in parts of Syria. Okay? Go do that for a week. And you come back and tell me about privilege. You're privileged just to be in this country. And look, East St. Louis, no picnic. But I take East St. Louis over Deir ez-Zor, right? Or Raqqa in the Middle East. Hands down. East St. Louis would be Disneyland compared to those places. You can see this in this movie. And the other thing you can see is just how absolutely evil and utterly corrupt the Bush administration was. I hated the Bush administration. Oh, God, those 8 years were horrific. And I was not fond of Obama because he was just another version of this kind of phony caricature puppet. But he was more dangerous than Bush, in my opinion. And still might be. But those 8 years of Bush, every day I was like, do I have to watch this guy again? Terrible. Absolutely terrible. One of the things that comes out also in this documentary is that presidents are nothing more than arms salesmen. And if you think about it, it's absolutely true. Presidents are basically the point man or the lead salesperson for the military-industrial complex. And this film clearly shows how that operates. It illustrates it. And Trump is the latest version. What has he done? He's gone to Saudi Arabia. One of the first things he did, he made a big deal. So all the Saudis, all this billions of dollars of equipment. And I was like, wow, that made him feel like a real president. But he's not alone. They all do it. It's part of the gig. So Breakaway Civilization, in this instance, would look around this world and they'd say, we've had enough. We want to get out of here. Now, generally speaking, who's going to be able to afford to get out of here? If indeed they can't get out of here. Because here's where we cross the radioactive Rubicon of the Van Allen radiation belt. Who can get out of here? And is there a secret space program? I think there is. But I don't think it happens in the same way that has to do with launching rockets into space and payloads and all that stuff. This is just my 2 cents here, is that the secret space program is interdimensional. That's what I think it is. It's interdimensional. If you go back to Ben Rich in his deathbed confession, Ben Rich was the guy who's the head of Lockheed Skunk Works. He basically said, not only can we go to the stars, we've been there. He also talks about free energy. And he basically said, how do we get to the stars? We solved Einstein's equation. So essentially, here's what I think the model is that the people that pilot the craft are sentient beings. They've figured out how to do this kind of sentient. This is where I think the back-engineered stuff comes into play. Because the craft is a sentient being. It responds. The craft is like a highly evolved version of AI. But it's evolved to the point where it is not just a robot. It is not just this automated thing participating in some kind of jacked in and wired device that is an extension of whoever's sitting in that craft. But this is kind of the clue that he left behind. That if you can think it, you can go there. That's kind of how it works. So so I think the secret space program is more of an interdimensional program and launches you out into space or into the multiverse. That's where I think it is. I'm not sure if it has to do with like massive amounts of payload and secret flights out of the South Pole and getting into near Earth orbit, low Earth orbit, and then going into interstellar space with an interstellar space drive. But that said, we do have a low Earth orbit kind of space program, because I always say low Earth orbit now. And that's kind of where a lot of these satellites are hanging out, in this low Earth orbit. And it's not beyond the Van Allen radiation belt. So, not long ago, in fact, just the other day, Asgardia became the first nation in space. This is, you're going to hear more about this. The whole idea of the breakaway civilization is going to become more and more prevalent. Jeff Bezos has Blue Origin. We're going to talk about that. He's theoretically going to put people up into low Earth orbit as space tourism. And of course, Elon Musk has been working with SpaceX for a while now, in conjunction with NASA. One time I was in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, which is just on the other side of the SpaceX operation there, and I was in one of those mineral baths and saw a UFO come right over the hill into the SpaceX facilities or whatever they're just on the other side. It was very interesting. I've seen a few UFOs, and certainly there was one that night. It was not a craft coming back. It was definitely something different. Okay, so let's talk about Asgardia. This is kind of a trip. Asgardia is almost kind of a joke in some ways, but it's still kind of interesting. They managed to get a low Earth orbiting satellite into space, and they were granted this status by the United Nations. So this is from CNN, and it's about Asgardia. The world's first space nation has taken flight. On November 12th, Asgardia cemented its presence in outer space by launching the Asgardia 1 satellite. The nanosat is roughly the size of a loaf of bread. Everybody's got to start somewhere, right? Everybody's got to start somewhere. So the big idea of Asgardia is about the size of a loaf of bread. But we're going to keep going with this, all right? It's kind of interesting. It undertook a 2-day journey from NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia, the United States, to the International Space Station, ISS. There is no ISS. I mean, the ISS is a ruse, okay? So could this be in low Earth orbit? Yes, it could be. Is it with ISS? Do your homework on ISS. It contains 0.5 terabytes of data belonging to 18,000 of Asgardia's citizens, such as family photographs, as well as digital representations of the space nation's flag, coat of arms, and constitution. They have a constitution. Russian scientist Dr. Igor Asherbaily founded the world's first independent nation to operate in outer space in October 2016. So this is a new nation. It's only been around a year. Named after a Norse mythological city in the skies, Asgardia is free to join, and so far about 114,000 people have signed up. Asherbaily says the project's mission is to provide a peaceful society, offer easier access to space technologies, and protect Earth from space threats, such as asteroids and man-made debris in space. While Asgardia's citizens, for the time being, remain based on Earth, the satellite launch brings the nation one step closer to space. Asgardia 1 made its journey to the ISS aboard the OA Antares Cygnus, a NASA commercial cargo vehicle. Now it must wait for 3 weeks as vital supplies and scientific equipment are transferred from the NASA ship to the 6 people currently living at the ISS. Are they really living there? The nanosat will then be detached from the NASA vehicle and begin its own orbital journey around the Earth. Now, I do believe that it will have a low Earth orbit, Citizens' data will remain in orbit for between 5 and 18 months, the typical lifespan of this type of satellite. It will then burn out and disappear. For Asher Bailey, the launch fulfills a pledge he made when establishing the Space Nation to take its citizens to space via their data. I promised there would be a launch, he says. We selected NASA as a reliable partner because we have to meet the commitments that I made 13 months ago. Within 40 hours of the project being announced in 2016, over 100,000 people had applied for citizenship on Asgardia's website. After 3 weeks, Asgardia had 500,000 applicants. Anyone over 18 years old with an email address, regardless of gender, nationality, race, religion, and financial standing, can apply for citizenship, including ex-convicts, provided they are clear of charges at the time of application. Today, there are 114,000 Asgardians from 204 countries. A population dropped from 211,000 in June when voting to determine the details of Asgardia's constitution began. So they lost half their people because they didn't agree with the constitution. Only those who agreed to adopt the finalized constitution are counted as Asgardians. Turkey currently has the largest number of Asgardians with 16,500 residents. Raven Sin, an artist based in Hong Kong, told CNN she signed up to become an Asgardian in November 2016 after hearing about it on a Chinese radio show while she was in Toronto. I really want to be able to see if human beings are able to have more opportunity to express their opinions, she told CNN. The society we live in now, everything seems to be either capitalism or communism. There's a lot of conflicts. As a human being, I would hope to see if we could have other ways of living for a better life. And more options. John Spiro, a digital marketing specialist who organizes a monthly meetup for Hong Kong-based Asgardians, told CNN it was the possibility of sending personal data into space that excited him. I help translate and preserve Buddhist sutras as a hobby, and the symbolism of sending one of those religious texts in electronic form up to the heavens seemed very nice. Going forward, the Asgardia team hopes to create habitable platforms in low Earth orbits. The first one located 100 to 200 miles from space, which is also where the ISS is located, theoretically. The first human flight into this location is projected to take place in 8 years' time. So if you're an Asgardian who is in their 60s, I don't know, maybe your chance of being an Asgardian in space are a little bit limited. We want to give equal opportunities to everyone who has a mind who can do something for their protection. Asher Bailey said, what kind of protection is he talking about? Our real home is not the house or the city we were born in. Our home is planet Earth, and we want to protect it. Isn't that an interesting idea? Let's go to space. Let's get out of Earth to protect Earth. This is interesting. We want to protect the Earth. We want to protect the Earth. Let's get out of the Earth to protect the Earth. It's not a fantasy. Going to Mars, the galactic, so on. That's just fake. That's just fake, he says. I intend something more real. Further satellite launches are in the works, but no dates have yet been confirmed. So this guy's a 53-year-old rocket scientist, and he is single-handedly bankrolling the project for a sum that's undisclosed. Regularly reported to be a billionaire, although he has never appeared on the Forbes rich list. The Azerbaijan-born Russian graduated from Azerbaijan State Oil Academy in 1985, and 3 years later founded Socium, a software and consulting firm turned holding company with over 10,000 employees. That's an interesting guy. After moving to Moscow in the 90s, he became a heavyweight in the science industry, and in 2010, looks a little like Captain Kangaroo, was awarded the Russian State Science and Technology Prize. 3 years later, he founded the Aerospace International Research Center in Vienna. And today, he's chairman of UNESCO's Science and Space Committee. So he's in with UNESCO. I'm not sure it's a great thing. In short, Asher Bailey is no beginner when it comes to space. Anyway, this goes on for a while. And it talks about becoming a legitimate country. He says, one of Asgardia's most ambitious plans is to gain UN membership. To achieve this, the UN Security Council must firstly approve Asgardia's application to be considered a nation, then 2/3 of the members of the General Assembly must vote for its admission. A state has to have these characteristics: a permanent population, a defined territory, a government, and the capacity to enter into relations with other states, and it must be recognized as a state by other states. Joni Gabrinowitz, a space law expert, professor at the Beijing Institute of Technology's School of Law, tells CNN. Asher Bailey plans for Asgardia to form a democratic government as well as a prosecutor's office, national audit office, and other governmental bodies. This is a trip, isn't it? I mean, there's no physical place for these people to hang out, and this guy is creating an entire structure and system. And he's not a lightweight. Governmental departments will be run by Asgardians in the locations they represent, while the administrative center will be in Vienna. These have not yet been formed. A parliamentary election will come first. Asgardians have until March 29th to submit their applications to become parliamentarians. After the election, governmental bodies will then be formed. When asked by CNN how Asgardia intends to provide peace to its citizens without a physical settlement, Asher Bailey says the nation's citizens can take advantage of their dual citizenship. If I have problems on Earth, I'll have my embassy from Asgardia. It's as if you're a tourist. You can go to your embassy and they'll try to help you. Okay, so this is interesting, right? This guy is creating an outer space country, an off-planet country, and he's anchoring it with a little bread loaf, half terabyte satellite, and he's applying to be recognized by the UN. So we're talking about an autonomous country that is actually existing here on Earth, even though theoretically it's got a loaf of bread computer for 18 months in space. This is fascinating. This is because, you know, there's this whole gender dysphoria thing, right? And people are either je, vi, ze, and we're getting rid of the pronouns, and you can be anything now. I mean, you've all seen that guy who's like 56 or 57 years old, and he dresses up like a little girl and he's been adopted by people. It's just bizarre. So now apparently that's like spilled over into nationhood. And you can have a nation of people who apply to be in your nation, and they can live all over the world, even though their outpost is in space, but they're not in space. This guy's crafty. I like where he's kind of going with this. He's kind of crafty, right? So what happens now? I mean, let's say they say, okay, yeah, you can enter into relations with other countries. Oh man, that's crazy, right? So what if you're maybe Harvey Weinstein can become an Asgardian. You can seek political refuge in Asgardia. I'm sorry, Mr. Weinstein. I'm sorry, we cannot deport Mr. Weinstein. Even though we've uncovered at least another 30 women, half of which are under the age of 14, we can't deport him because he has received political asylum in Asgardia. Where is he? Well, he's in Saint-Tropez right now. But I thought he's in Asgardia. Isn't that supposed to be? Yes, I know it's complicated, but we're redefining what it is to be a country. And we're redefining the whole idea about borders. So, unfortunately for now, we cannot extradite him. Do you see where this is going? I mean, I'm not saying that this is the whole intent and purpose. But it's fascinating to think that there are 115,000 people around the planet who now consider themselves Asgardians. I love it. What about the other breakaway services? How about Blue Origin? Well, the latest from Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos's contribution. 2, 1.
I don't think it's going to be 2017 at this point, could be, but I still think we can do commercial paying passengers in 2018. If we can make access to space low cost, then entrepreneurs will be unleashed. You will see creativity. You will see dynamism. You will see the same thing in space that I've witnessed on the internet over the last 20 years. And believe me, that's fun. But if we can reduce the cost of launch by a factor of 10, and then by a factor of 100, believe me, that's going to take time, a lot of hard work. But if we can do that, you will be living in a completely new world. It'll be a golden age of space exploration.
So this is from April of last year, or this past year, April 6th. He's selling $1 billion a year of Amazon stock to get millions of people to space. This is what it says. Bezos wants to see the space industry expand to the scale of today's internet industry, creating a completely new world, and he's spending quite a bit to make it happen. Amazon founder and CEO also founded Blue Origin, a reusable rocket company that builds Bezos' childhood dreams of space colonization. While the company will one day be a thriving enterprise, Bezos joked it's going to be a long road. One of the company's rockets, New Glenn, will cost at least $2.5 billion. My business model right now for Blue Origin is I sell about $1 billion a year of stock and use it to invest in Blue Origin. How much is he worth? If he's selling $1 billion a year in stock, how much is Jeff Bezos worth? That's a scary thought. Bezos appeared Wednesday at, get this, the 33rd Space Symposium in Colorado Springs, where he said he would reveal more details on his rocket. His startup hopes will take paying customers to space by 2018. He said he'll apply some of the lessons he learned at Amazon, especially when it comes to bringing down costs and engaging customer demand. So Bezos has been talking about this for a while, and his idea is to create space tourism, but ultimately what Bezos wants to do is he wants to create a low Earth orbiting version of what was created in the movie Elysium with Matt Damon, if you haven't seen that. And the whole idea here would be to essentially remove oneself from the Earth and spend the majority of the time, or their time, in space, and then turn Earth into kind of a private preserve. This is part of the dream of the elites, and this is part of the breakaway civilization, and that it would be not just Bezos, but people who had the same amount of financial and economic clout, along with their, if they could stand each other, along with their combined intellect. And then you throw in the augmentation of the elites, which is going to be happening fairly soon, with the addition of chips and upgrades and all that stuff, right? And now you've got not just a breakaway civilization that is moving away from Earth, but a breakaway civilization with inside Earth itself, that it's a group of people who are trying in their own way, and not always the best way, right? Because they've got the resources. They can make the rules. And yet, they want to become the breakaway civilization, which is the breakaway from the average, the breakaway from the herd, the breakaway from the pack. That's their version of the breakaway civilization. It's all combined. So you get people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and who else? Eric Schmidt and Jeff Bezos. And all these people are working. And I'm not saying they're working in concert together. Some of them might be, but they're working in concert to create their version of a breakaway civilization. And the ultimate manifestation of that is the breakaway civilization leaves Earth. It leaves Earth. And it leaves the rest of us here to deal with whatever it is, you know, they've left for us to deal with. You know, whatever that thing is, killer drones, yeah, you know, bad AI, who knows? I mean, the train has left the station. And it's pretty clear that between Musk and Bezos and I don't really take this guy from Russia all that seriously, but I think his ideas to create an autonomous country are quite real and are very interesting to look at, particularly in the light of whatever other definitions are being shaken out and redefined, whether they're a natural, organic process of redefinition or we're being forced to redefine things by third parties and outside sources. Then we've got Bezos. And we have Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk is pretty far ahead of Bezos at this point. And he's been doing the SpaceX thing with Richard Branson in New Mexico. And there's a launch that's happening tonight. So if you are down in Florida and you have, let's say you've got a condo in Jupiter, Florida, you'll be able to see a SpaceX rocket launch tonight at 8 p.m. from the Kennedy Space Center. And it has a super secret payload. The name of the Elon Musk flight is Zuma. Let's play a little CNN clip here so you can hear what the mainstream has to say about this launch. It says SpaceX successfully launched and landed. It's the first time a SpaceX launched an Air Force airplane, space plane. How's that going to work? Why can't they just give me some voiceover? Anyway, this is a brief history of SpaceX. We're talking about the Falcon 9, carried the X-37B orbital test vehicle. So essentially, Musk is pretty far down the line here. Bezos got a lot of catching up to do. So they're supposed to have this rocket launch on Wednesday, and it was pushed back until Thursday, and then was delayed another 24 hours. So a spokesperson said that SpaceX decided to stand down in order to take a closer look at some data regarding the rocket's firing, where the very top portion of the houses the payload. It says Zuma is headed for low Earth orbit. Of course it is. But we don't know exactly where. Unlike the vast majority of its launches, SpaceX will cut off its live stream before the payload is deployed. The idea is to leave no clues about its final destination. Zuma was built for the U.S. government, and it's not unusual for the government to keep information about sensitive payloads under wraps. Typically, these payloads involve a military concern such as a national security, defense, or surveillance. Northrop Grumman, the Virginia-based aerospace and defense company, says it's involved in the Zuma mission, declined to give any details about the spacecraft or reveal which arm of the government funded it. So, while Elon Musk is pretty far down the line, Bezos just test-fired what he calls a game-changing rocket engine. The U.S. government assigned Northrop Grumman the responsibility of acquiring launch services for the mission. So this is Elon Musk getting involved in surveillance, military, reconnaissance, and surveillance. So SpaceX conducted a secretive launch for the NRO back in May. In that case, the agency did not shy away from claiming involvement. SpaceX also launched a covert spaceplane in September for the U.S. Air Force. Friday's launch is a big moment for SpaceX, even without the gravitas of carrying a top-secret government payload. It'll mark the company's 17th launch so far in 2017, a significant pickup in pace over 2016, when the company launched just 8 times all year. It's pretty interesting whether or not these rockets actually go into space because they cut the feed off as soon as the payload is deployed. But I suppose if you live in Florida, you'll be able to watch from a distance this rocket take flight. So the breakaway civilization, the manifestation of the breakaway civilization theoretically is space, going off-world. But really, the breakaway civilization is more than that. The breakaway civilization is a group of people who are going to decide based on their resources, pooling and accumulating their resources, that they want to form a group, an elite group that breaks away from the rest of us. That's what we're talking about. That ultimately, that velocity leads them off the planet. This is the definition of the breakaway civilization. Now, do they have the only rights to the breakaway civilization? And the answer, theoretically, is no. Because we, in and of ourselves, can be our own version of the breakaway civilization. It's not sexy, doesn't make headlines, doesn't get coverage on CNN, but it's already happening. It is afoot. It is afoot. And people are breaking away from their enculturation. Now, chaos is playing a role in this, obviously, because when things are chaotic, people are trying to understand what's going on and redefining who they are and the culture they live in, and in which case they may wake up and say, I'm not happy with this. And then the real journey begins. So this is where we are, and we've never really come to this point where so many people en masse are having this moment or this experience. And it's not just people who listen to the show, it's people, like if you go into on the left side of things, they're having their own kind of breakaway moment. And who would want to deny their breakaway moment? It's their breakaway moment. They're trying to come up with their, they look around and say, okay, we don't like Trump, we don't like America, we don't like what this stands for, we need to break away. Maybe they just move to California. Maybe that'll satisfy their breakaway aspirations. But this is what's happening, and this, a lot of this has to do astrologically with Uranus and Aries, and radically redefining who we are as individuals. So the breakaway civilization, we're all part of it. It's just that some people have greater resources and to some degree greater reach, at least at this point from a physical standpoint, but maybe not always from a spiritual or metaphysical standpoint. One of the things I wanted to talk about before I shut it down today is there is this one, I'm going to get this link to this movie. There was this one part of this movie where this guy was talking about creating scenarios. Like, for instance, let's just say the scenario is what happened in Las Vegas. Or let's say the scenario is what happened in Santa Rosa. He said, this is a really interesting piece. This guy's involved in this, right? He said that just when people are starting to figure out what happened, we're long gone. We've been on to the next thing way before that. So think about that. It's just something to kind of file away. That this is the order of the intelligence that we're working with. And we're doing everything we can to, in our own way, catch up and experience our own process of deep learning. But it is a wild and woolly world out there. All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of this journey. And this Friday FARcast, I want to thank everybody for... I got some good emails this week. Supportive stuff. Good stuff. We're coming into the Thanksgiving week next week, and I'm probably going to take the week off. I haven't scheduled any readings next week, and I'm probably going to take the show off the entire week and jump back on the following week. I'll probably come back on Sunday night for the Sunday Night Live show. I haven't made up my mind yet, but it's looking like that. I've got my son all week, so I don't have the luxury of having him around all the time, so I may want to just take advantage of that. But anyway, thank you I got a couple of really supportive emails, and it feels good to feel like there's some momentum taking place here. And oh, by the way, I've been talking with Emily Moyer over from Off Planet Radio, and her and Randy are totally into the idea of creating an event here in Texas. And I'm thinking somewhere around the spring equinox. That's what I'm thinking. Like around, April. The beginning of Aries. And the idea of the events would be different in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, there'll be some talks and some experiential stuff, and we'll talk about astrology, and we'll have discussions, and, it'll be very collaborative and very communal. But I'm also thinking that what we want to do is have some fun and have some excursions to swimming holes in Texas, in the hill country, and see if we can get some bales of hay and some targets, and get some bows and arrows out there, and get a bow and arrow instructor, and let people learn how to shoot a bow and arrow, and different stuff, experiential things. 3 days where you can soak in some knowledge and connect with people and have a really good time. So when you leave, you'll have an affirmative experience. So we're talking about that, and that's going to be in hopefully in April, if we can manage to pull this off. Try to keep it around maybe 100 people, something like that. Think of it as like a big weekend picnic and hanging out with some people that have a lot of very similar interests, and you'll learn some stuff too. You'll learn about things that maybe I'm into at that time, or Randy and Emily, and I'll try to bring in maybe one other person, and also see if I can bring in some people that do some local craft stuff and can teach you maybe how to do something from the maker culture or something like that. I want this to be an event where it's creative. You're not just sitting around listening to a bunch of people talk. I want people to interact, have fun, engage, be a little bit challenged as well. Maybe a few challenging moments, not too big. I'm not going to have you butcher a cow or anything like that. Although the thought did cross my mind. No, just kidding. But this is what we're trying to do, or at least thinking of. At least I'm thinking of it. Anyway, we'll have to talk with Randy and Emily, and then look at some of the logistics and all that stuff. And then lastly, I got the word from Regina that the interview that we did is going to air. I believe it's going live on her site tomorrow. So if you follow me on Facebook, I'll give you the high sign there. It's pretty exciting because it's not just Regina and myself having a great discussion like we normally do. It's also exciting because Regina is really building out her new website. And this is going to be sort of the next version of what she's doing. And we talked yesterday, and she's totally excited about it. She said she hasn't felt this passionate about her work in a long time. So anyway, that's going to happen hopefully on Saturday. And check out Facebook, and I'll let you guys know. And I'll put it up on my website too, and a link to it. So that's great. And hopefully we'll be doing more of these on a regular basis. All right, that's it. I've given you a lot of brain jam here in the final moment of the show. All right. Be your own breakaway civilization. That is the message of the day. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open as possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and you've been listening to the Friday FARcast. Have a great, great weekend. I think I'll be back for the live stream on Sunday. Pretty sure of it. And then I'm probably going to go dark for about a week. All right, take it.